My name is Eleanor, and at 68 years old, I never imagined my own children would throw me out of the house I paid for. After decades of supporting them financially, they had the audacity to tell me I was no longer needed. Their ingratitude shattered my heart, but little did they know that my name was on every legal document. Their faces when those eviction notices arrived? Priceless. Before I continue this story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like and subscribe button to support this channel. And get ready for the most satisfying revenge against entitled adult children you'll ever hear. I was born in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, a quiet Midwestern town where family values were everything. My parents raised me to work hard and be independent, lessons I carried with me throughout my life. At 19, I fell head over heels for Harold Thompson, a handsome young man with ambitious dreams and a kind heart. We married within a year, and I thought our love story would last forever. Harold and I built our life together brick by brick. He worked as an electrical engineer, while I pursued nursing school. The early years were tough but fulfilling. We saved every penny we could, dreaming of financial security and a comfortable retirement. Our family grew with the birth of our first child, Amanda, when I was 26. Brandon followed 3 years later, and Lisa completed our family when I was 31. Our home was modest but filled with love. Harold coached Little League Baseball for Brandon, and I spent weekends driving Amanda and Lisa to dance recitals and soccer practices. We weren't wealthy, but we made sure our children never went without necessities. More importantly, we tried to instill in them the same values my parents had taught me: hard work, responsibility, and financial prudence. When the children entered their teenage years, I noticed small changes in their attitudes. Amanda became fixated on having designer clothes like her friends. Brandon expected the latest video game consoles without understanding their cost. Lisa, our youngest, watched her siblings and quickly learned to ask for expensive things with the perfect puppy dog eyes that Harold could never resist. "They're just kids," Harold would say whenever I expressed concern. "They'll understand the value of money when they're older and have to earn it themselves." I wanted to believe him, but something nagged at me. We had begun giving them allowances at age 12, trying to teach budgeting skills. Instead of saving, they spent everything immediately and then asked for advances. Still, I reasoned that many teenagers went through similar phases. Everything changed 15 years ago when Harold suffered a massive heart attack at work. One minute he was fine, the next he was gone, leaving me a widow at 53. The children were adults by then, Amanda 27, Brandon 24, and Lisa 21, but they were devastated. We all were. In the fog of grief came one small mercy. Harold had always been meticulous about insurance. His life insurance policy left me financially secure, along with our mortgage-free home and retirement accounts we'd built over the years. While money couldn't fill the void Harold left, it meant I wouldn't have financial stress on top of my emotional pain. The first time Amanda asked for financial help after Harold's death, it was for her wedding to Derek. "Dad would have wanted to give me the perfect day," she said tearfully. "How could I say no?" 6 months later, Brandon's startup business needed just a small investment to get off the ground. And Lisa, still in college, needed help with tuition when she decided to switch majors for the third time. Those initial requests seemed reasonable. A father would have helped his children in these ways. I told myself I was honoring Harold's memory by stepping in. What I didn't realize was that I was setting a pattern that would continue for the next 15 years. As my children moved into their 30s, the requests didn't stop. They increased. Amanda's perfect marriage ended in an expensive divorce. Brandon's business failed, but he immediately had ideas for new ventures that needed funding. Lisa graduated but jumped from job to job, never quite finding her passion, and always needing help with rent. My friends noticed the pattern before I did. My nursing colleague Judith was the first to say something. "Eleanor, you're enabling them," she told me over coffee one day. "They're adults. When are they going to stand on their own 2 feet? They're going through rough patches," I defended. "Family helps family." "Yes, but there's helping and then there's doing everything for them. Harold wouldn't want you to drain your retirement fund on grown adults who should be supporting themselves." I dismissed her concerns, but her words lingered. Was I really helping my children, or was I preventing them from growing up and facing consequences? By the time I began seriously asking myself this question, the pattern was deeply established. I was the family bank, the safety net, the solution to every financial problem. The extent of my financial support for my children went far beyond what most parents provide for adult offspring. When Amanda's marriage to Derek collapsed after 7 years, she came to me in tears over legal fees. "Mom, he's trying to take everything," she sobbed at my kitchen table. "The lawyer says I need $15,000 up front, or Derek will get the house and most of our assets." I wrote the check that same day. The divorce dragged on for 18 months, with additional legal expenses piling up. By the time it was finalized, I had contributed over $40,000 to Amanda's legal battle. She kept the house and received a reasonable settlement, promising to pay me back as soon as things stabilize. Years later, I'm still waiting for the first repayment installment. Brandon's financial needs were even more substantial. His first business, a specialty coffee shop, failed after 2 years despite $60,000 of startup capital from me. Undeterred, he immediately pitched his next idea, a mobile app development company. "The coffee shop was too location dependent, Mom," he explained enthusiastically. "Tech is the future. With my business degree and this amazing developer I've partnered with, we can't fail. We just need operating capital for the first year." Another $30,000 later, that business also collapsed. Then came the food truck concept, followed by an online retail venture. Each failure was explained away with market conditions or bad timing, never poor planning or mismanagement. Each new idea came with promises of massive returns on my investment. Lisa's financial dependence took a different form. While her siblings requested large sums for specific purposes, Lisa needed constant smaller amounts that added up alarmingly over time. Her rent was always late. Her car repeatedly broke down. She lost her wallet. Her roommate moved out unexpectedly. There was always a crisis requiring immediate financial intervention. "Just until my next paycheck, Mom," was her standard promise. But the next paycheck always seemed to disappear on impulsive purchases rather than paying me back or building her own emergency fund. Beyond these major expenses, there were countless smaller drains. Helping with grandchildren's private school tuition, covering car payments when money was tight, paying off credit card debt that had reached collection agencies, and serving as an interest-free loan service for everything from vacation funding to household appliances. The few times I hesitated or suggested they might find another solution, the reaction was swift and effective. "I guess I'll just have to pull Tommy from his school mid-year," Amanda would sigh, referring to my eldest grandson. "He'll be heartbroken leaving all his friends, but children are resilient, right?" Or Brandon would say, "I understand, Mom. I'll just have to take one of those high-interest payday loans. They're predatory, but sometimes you have no choice." Lisa's approach was more direct. "Dad would have helped me. He always understood when I was struggling." The invocation of Harold's memory was particularly effective. What would he have done? Would he think I was being stingy with our children? The guilt was powerful, and it almost always ended with me writing another check. We established a pattern of Sunday family dinners at my house, which I cherished as precious time with my children and grandchildren. Increasingly, though, these gatherings became forums for financial discussions. "Before you go, Mom, can I talk to you about Tommy's summer camp deposit?" Amanda would say as others were leaving. "Mom, do you have a minute to look at this business proposal?" Brandon would ask, conveniently when no siblings were around to compete for funds. "My car made a funny noise on the way over," Lisa would mention casually as I served dessert. "I'm really worried about driving it home." My friend Judith became increasingly concerned. During our weekly walks, she would probe gently. "How much of your retirement savings is left, Eleanor?" "Enough," I would reply vaguely. "And how much is enough when you might live another 20 or 30 years? I had no good answer. The truth was, while I remained financially stable, my savings had dwindled significantly. The cushion I once had was thinning. I wasn't destitute, but I wasn't as secure as I should have been at my age. Other friends expressed similar concerns. My neighbor Frank, a retired financial advisor, offered to look over my accounts. "Eleanor, at the current rate of withdrawal, you're going to face serious problems within 10 years, he warned me. Your children are literally mortgaging your future. I knew they were right, but breaking the cycle seemed impossible. My children were dependent on me, and in a strange way I was dependent on them, on being needed, on feeling useful, on maintaining my role as the family matriarch and problem solver. Then came the economic downturn and everything changed. 3 years ago, a significant recession hit our region particularly hard. The automotive factory where Amanda worked in accounting announced layoffs. Brandon's latest venture, a local delivery service, lost clients as businesses cut expenses. Lisa, who had finally held a marketing job for nearly 2 years, was suddenly last hired, first fired. Within 2 months, all 3 of my children faced serious financial strain. Brandon was the first to suggest what would become our new living arrangement. "Mom, I've been thinking," he said during a hastily called family meeting in my living room. "We're all struggling with housing costs. Your house is too big for just one person. What if we combined resources?" Amanda quickly supported the idea. "Think about it. You wouldn't be alone anymore. We could share expenses. It would be like the old days, all of us under one roof. Plus, you're getting older, Mom," Lisa added with what seemed like genuine concern. "What if you fell and no one was there to help? This way, you'd always have someone around." The way they presented it, the arrangement would benefit everyone. They framed it as multi-generational living, a practical modern solution to economic challenges. They talked about other cultures where extended families commonly live together, supporting one another. "But my house only has 3 bedrooms, I pointed out. "Where would everyone sleep?" That's when Brandon suggested selling both my house and Amanda's, which she was struggling to afford post-divorce, to buy a larger home that could accommodate everyone, me, my 3 children, and Amanda's 2 children. Lisa and Brandon were currently renting, so they had no property to contribute to the arrangement. The idea made practical sense. Property values in my neighborhood had increased significantly. I could sell my house for much more than Harold and I had paid decades earlier. Combined with the equity from Amanda's house, we could purchase a larger home with enough space for everyone. "We'll all contribute to the household expenses," Amanda promised. "You won't have to carry the burden alone anymore." After weeks of consideration and house hunting, we found a 2-story, 6-bedroom home in a nice suburb. The downstairs master bedroom would be mine, they insisted, while the others would take the upstairs bedrooms. The purchase price was considerable, but with the sale of 2 properties, we could afford it with a manageable mortgage. Or rather, I could afford it. When it came time to sign paperwork, various complications arose that prevented my children from being on the mortgage. "My credit is still damaged from the divorce," Amanda explained. "The bank considers my income too unstable because of my business," Brandon said. "My student loans are affecting my debt-to-income ratio," Lisa told me. "So I alone signed the mortgage and all associated documents." My attorney, Martin, expressed concern. "Eleanor, if you're the only one on the deed and mortgage, you're taking all the financial risk," he cautioned. "Do you have written agreements about how your children will contribute?" I assured him we would formalize everything once we moved in. We were family after all. Written agreements seemed unnecessarily formal and implied a lack of trust. The first few months in the new house were wonderful. My grandchildren filled the home with laughter. We cooked family meals in the spacious kitchen. For the first time since Harold died, I didn't feel lonely. We even established a family contribution jar, where everyone would put their share of utilities and groceries. Gradually, things began to change. The family contribution jar contained less and less each month, with various excuses about temporary financial setbacks. When the refrigerator broke, I was the one who paid for a new one. When property taxes came due, the responsibility fell solely to me. Then came the renovation requests. "Mom, the kitchen is so outdated," Amanda said. "Granite countertops would really increase the home's value. The basement could be converted into an amazing media room," Brandon suggested. "It would be an investment in the property." "My bathroom shower is so small," Lisa complained. "A remodel wouldn't cost that much." One by one, I approved these projects, paying for each improvement. My children assured me these were investments in our shared home, increasing its value for everyone's benefit. The renovations expanded beyond necessities to include luxury upgrades. Hardwood floors throughout, A backyard deck with a built-in grill, smart home technology. As the house transformed, so did the family dynamics. Decision-making power subtly shifted. My preferences were increasingly overruled by consensus among my children. "Mom, no one uses formal dining rooms anymore," they said when I objected to converting mine into a home office for Brandon. "These light fixtures are so dated," they insisted when replacing the chandelier Harold and I had carefully selected years ago. Even my daily routines were affected. The television in the main living room was perpetually tuned to shows I didn't enjoy. Mealtime shifted later than I preferred. My request for quiet after 10 p.m. was regularly ignored. When I raised concerns, they were dismissed with patronizing reassurances. "Mom, you're just not used to modern living," Brandon would say. "It's good for you to adapt to new things at your age," Amanda would insist. "Keeps your mind sharp." My friend Judith noticed the change in me during our now less frequent lunch dates. "You seem tired, Eleanor. And you've lost weight. Is everything okay at home?" I made excuses about adjusting to a busy household, but the truth was more troubling. I was becoming a guest in my own home, a guest who paid all the bills but had increasingly little say in how things were run. Still, I told myself this was family. We were supporting each other through difficult times. The arrangement was temporary until everyone got back on their feet financially. I just needed to be patient. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Sunday evening nearly 2 years after we had all moved in together. I had prepared a pot roast, Harold's old recipe, and set the dining table for a family dinner. Everyone was home, a rarity given various social schedules. I thought it would be a warm, pleasant evening. As we finished dessert, Brandon cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to talk about something important." The serious tone in his voice immediately put me on alert. Amanda and Lisa exchanged glances, and I noticed they seemed nervous but determined. "What is it?" I asked, setting down my coffee cup. "We've been discussing the household situation," Brandon continued, clearly designated as the spokesperson, "and we think it's time for some changes around here." Amanda jumped in. "We love having you here, Mom, but we feel like we're ready to take over running the household ourselves." "Take over?" I repeated, confused. "What do you mean?" "Well," Lisa said, "we're thinking it would be better if we handled all the decisions about the house. You know, bills, maintenance, decorating, rules. Adult stuff." I felt a chill despite the warm kitchen. "But I already handle most of that. And I'm paying for." "That's part of what we want to change," Brandon interrupted. "We think it's time you let go of the financial control. You're getting older, Mom. Managing money gets harder. We don't want you to stress about it." "I'm perfectly capable of managing my own money," I said firmly. "I've been doing it successfully since before you were born." The conversation quickly deteriorated. What had begun as a supposedly concerned discussion about household management revealed itself as something much more sinister. "Look, Mom," Amanda said, her voice hardening, "we appreciate everything you've done, but it's time for you to step back. This living arrangement isn't working with you trying to control everything." "Control everything?" I was genuinely shocked. "I barely have any say in what happens in this house anymore." Brandon leaned forward. "That's not how we see it. You're constantly questioning our decisions, complaining about noise, criticizing how we parent the kids. It's too much. And frankly," Lisa added, "you're getting more difficult to live with. You're set in your ways. You don't understand how modern families function." The conversation became increasingly heated. Accusations flew. According to my children, I was stubborn, old-fashioned, interfering, and unable to accept that times had changed. When I reminded them that I was the one who had purchased the house and was paying most of the expenses, the true nature of their thinking emerged. "We've been carrying you too," Brandon shouted. "Who drives you to doctor appointments? Who helps with technology when you can't figure out your phone? Who puts up with your endless stories about the good old days?" "You've had your life, Mom," Amanda said coldly. "Now it's our turn. We need space to live ours without you hovering over everything." Then Lisa delivered the final blow. "We think it would be best if you found somewhere else to live." I stared at my 3 children, unable to process what I was hearing. "You want me to leave my own house? The house that I bought?" "We've contributed too," Amanda insisted, though their financial contributions had been minimal at best. And we need the space for our families. You'd be happier in a senior community anyway. People your own age, activities organized for you. Thank you for everything you've done, Brandon said with artificial politeness. But we don't need you anymore. Not living here anyway. The betrayal was so complete, so unexpected, that I couldn't even cry. I sat in stunned silence as my children outlined their plan. I would move out within 2 weeks. They would help me find a small apartment or assisted living facility. They would even help pack my things. Their generosity was overwhelming. I finally found my voice. And who will pay the mortgage on this house when I leave? There was an awkward pause before Brandon spoke. We'll figure that out. Maybe refinance it in our names. I see. My voice was remarkably steady despite the earthquake happening in my heart. And when were you planning to discuss this with me? We're discussing it now, Lisa said, as if they were being completely reasonable. We wanted to give you time to adjust to the idea. 2 weeks. They wanted me out of my own house in 2 weeks. I left the table without another word and went to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. For the first time since Harold died, I felt truly alone. The betrayal was physical, a pain in my chest so acute I wondered if I was having a heart attack. Over the next few days, the pressure increased. Boxes appeared in my room. Apartment listings were left on my bed. The children alternated between cold efficiency and false concern, but the message was clear. I needed to go. I called Judith in tears. Can I stay with you for a few days? I need to figure things out. My dear friend didn't hesitate. Pack a bag. I'll be there in 20 minutes. As I waited for Judith, I looked around the master bedroom that was supposedly mine. Despite paying for the house, I had been relegated to the smallest bedroom on the main floor, pitched to me initially as a convenience so I wouldn't have to climb stairs. Now I realized it had been the first step in minimizing my presence in the home. When Judith arrived, Amanda intercepted her at the door. Mom's just upset because we suggested she might be happier in a seniors community, she explained, loud enough for me to hear from the hallway. You know how difficult transitions can be at her age. Judith, bless her heart, wasn't buying it. I'm sure Eleanor will tell me all about it herself, she said, pushing past Amanda to help me with my suitcase. As we drove away, I couldn't help looking back at the house, my house, wondering if I would ever return. The despair was overwhelming. After everything I had sacrificed, after all the support I had provided, my own children had discarded me like an outdated appliance. What am I going to do, Judith? I whispered. First, you're going to get a good night's sleep, she said firmly. Then tomorrow you're going to call Martin. Martin? Your attorney. Because something tells me your children don't understand whose name is actually on the deed to that house. A small flicker of hope ignited in my chest. I had been so emotionally devastated that I hadn't even considered the legal reality of my situation. Judith was right. It was time to talk to Martin. The next morning, after a restless night on Judith's guest bed, I called Martin's office. His secretary, recognizing the distress in my voice, squeezed me into his schedule that afternoon. Martin had been my attorney since Harold died, handling everything from the estate to the purchase of the new house. His office was a comforting space of leather-bound books and family photos, a place where I had always felt my interests were protected. Eleanor. He greeted me warmly, but his smile faded as he took in my appearance. What's happened? Through tears and anger, I explained the situation, how my children had ambushed me with demands that I leave my own home, their dismissive attitudes, and their plan to somehow take over the property. Martin listened carefully, taking notes and occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair with a troubled expression. First, let me clarify the legal situation, he said. The house is entirely in your name, correct? You're the only one on the deed and mortgage. Yes. None of the children qualified for the mortgage, so I purchased it independently. Have they contributed substantially to the mortgage payments or property taxes? I shook my head. Hardly anything. They occasionally contribute to utilities and groceries, but even that has become irregular. And there's no written agreement about ownership shares or their right to occupy the home?
No.
We discussed creating something formal, but it never happened. Martin nodded, his expression clearing. Then legally, the situation is straightforward. You are the sole owner of the property. Your children have no ownership claim whatsoever. They are effectively your tenants, and without a formal lease, they are month-to-month tenants at will. What does that mean? I asked. It means you can evict them with proper notice, which in our state is 30 days. They cannot evict you from your own property. Any suggestion otherwise is legally baseless. A weight lifted from my shoulders. At least legally I wasn't powerless. There's something else you should know, Martin continued, his expression darkening. When you purchase the new house, I set up automatic notifications for any credit inquiries or lien attempts against the property. 2 weeks ago, there was a credit check run in preparation for a refinancing application. Refinancing? But I haven't applied to refinance the mortgage. Martin slid a document across the desk. No, you haven't. But it appears Brandon has been exploring the possibility. He couldn't proceed without your signature, of course, but the inquiry is concerning. I felt sick as I stared at the paper. The timing aligned perfectly with their sudden demand that I move out. Had they been planning to somehow pressure me into signing refinancing documents before forcing me out? Or worse, had they considered forging my signature? There's more, Martin said gently. After you called this morning, I had my assistant do some preliminary research. Brandon has formed an LLC named Thompson Family Holdings. Amanda and Lisa are listed as members. The LLC was created 3 months ago. What would they need a company for? Often family LLCs are created to manage shared assets or real estate. Without more information, I can't say for certain what their intentions were. But combined with the refinancing inquiry, it raises serious concerns. Martin's assistant knocked and entered with another folder. The bank records you requested, sir. He thanked her and opened the folder. Eleanor, you authorized us to monitor your accounts after Harold's death. We don't routinely review them, but given the circumstances, I took the liberty of checking recent transactions. What he showed me next confirmed my worst fears. There had been unusually large withdrawals from my investment account over the past 3 months. Not enormous amounts individually, but totaling nearly $30,000. Did you authorize these withdrawals? Martin asked. No, iwisparat. I haven't touched that account in years. It's for emergencies only. Martin picked up his phone. We need to contact the bank immediately and freeze your accounts. Then we need to report potential identity theft. The next hours were a blur of phone calls, security questions, and forms. The bank confirmed that the withdrawal requests had come through their online system, using my login credentials. Someone had accessed my account without my knowledge. Do you share your passwords with anyone? The fraud investigator asked. A memory surfaced. Brandon helping me set up online banking on my new phone several months ago. Had he watched me enter my password? Or had I naively shared it with him, trusting my own son? By late afternoon, we had secured my remaining assets. The bank would investigate the fraudulent withdrawals. Martin had begun preparing formal eviction notices for all 3 children, but the emotional toll was overwhelming. How could they do this? I asked Judith that evening, pacing her living room. These are my children. I changed their diapers. I nursed them through chicken pox. I paid for their education. How could they steal from me and try to take my home? Judith had no answers, only a shoulder to cry on and practical support. What will you do now? She asked. The question forced me to confront the reality of my situation. Despite the betrayal, these were still my children. Did I really want to evict them? Could I bear to see my grandchildren put out of their home? After a sleepless night, I returned to Martin's office with a decision. I want to confront them with what we've discovered, I said. But I also want to offer an alternative to eviction. Martin raised an eyebrow. You're more forgiving than most would be in your situation. It's not about forgiveness, I clarified. It's about salvaging what's left of my family if possible, and about establishing clear boundaries going forward. We spent the day drafting 2 sets of documents, formal eviction notices that would give my children 30 days to vacate the property, and an alternative proposal, a formal rental agreement with strict terms. Are you sure about this? Martin asked as I signed the documents. They've demonstrated they can't be trusted. I'm sure, I said, though my hand trembled slightly. Everyone deserves one last chance to do the right thing. As I left his office with the documents in hand, I felt a strange mixture of heartbreak and empowerment. For perhaps the first time since Harold died, I was taking a truly decisive stand for my own well-being. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my terms, not as a victim. I texted all 3 children the same message. I'll be coming by the house tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Everyone needs to be present. This is non-negotiable. Their responses came quickly, ranging from concern to defensive, but all agreed to be there. None suspected what awaited them. That night, staying again at Judith's house, I prayed for strength. Not just the strength to confront my children, but the strength to rebuild what remained of my life afterward. At 68, I was facing a completely unexpected new beginning. I arrived at the house, my house, precisely at 9 the next morning. Judith had offered to come for moral support, but this was something I needed to do alone. Martin, however, insisted on accompanying me in a professional capacity, and I was grateful for his reassuring presence. All 3 of my children were waiting in the living room, their expressions ranging from annoyed to concerned. Amanda's children were at school, which was a relief. They shouldn't witness what was about to unfold. Mom, what's going on? Who's this? Brandon asked, eyeing Martin suspiciously. This is Martin Goldstein, my attorney, I said, keeping my voice level as I set my briefcase on the coffee table. He's here to help clarify some legal matters. Legal matters? Lisa echoed, her voice rising. What are you talking about? I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, I replied, surprising myself with my steady tone. But let's make sure we're all on the same page. I opened the briefcase and removed the eviction notices, handing one to each of my children. These are formal eviction notices, giving you 30 days to vacate this property. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Eviction? Amanda shrieked, jumping to her feet. You can't evict us from our own home. Actually, Martin interjected calmly, she can. This property is solely owned by Eleanor Thompson. None of you have any legal claim to it whatsoever. Brandon skimmed the document, his face darkening. This is ridiculous. We've been contributing to this household for years. Have you? I asked, pulling out the financial records Martin had helped me prepare. Because according to these records, your combined contributions over the past 2 years amount to less than 8% of the household expenses. I've covered the mortgage, property taxes, insurance, most utilities, and all major repairs and renovations. We contribute in other ways, Lisa insisted. Time, energy, support. Support. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice now. Is that what you call telling me I'm too old and difficult to live with? Is that what you call demanding I leave my own home because you don't need me anymore? The room fell silent as my words hung in the air. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in their expressions, perhaps even a flicker of shame. You told her to leave? Martin asked, his professional demeanor slipping momentarily. Her own house. Brandon recovered quickly, shifting to negotiation mode. Mom, we were upset. Things were said in the heat of the moment. Of course we don't want you to leave. Really? I pulled out another set of documents. Then perhaps you can explain why you've been inquiring about refinancing this house without my knowledge. Or why you formed Thompson Family Holdings LLC 3 months ago. Or, most concerning, why $30,000 has been withdrawn from my investment account without my authorization. The color drained from Brandon's face. Amanda gasped. Lisa looked at her brother with wide eyes that asked, how does she know? That's identity theft and fraud, Martin stated flatly. Potentially criminal matters. You've been spying on us? Brandon's shock quickly transformed to anger. No, I've been protecting myself, I corrected him. Something I should have done much sooner. Amanda began to cry, her earlier indignation crumbling. Mom, please, you don't understand. We were just trying to secure our future. The economy is so uncertain. By stealing from me? By trying to take my home? I felt tears threatening but forced them back. I have supported all of you financially well into your adulthood. I sold my home to buy this one when you needed help. I've paid for renovations, covered your debts, funded your business ventures. And your response was to conspire behind my back, then try to discard me when I was no longer useful. The neighborhood was quiet that morning, making the tension in the room even more pronounced. Through the front window, I noticed Mr. Peterson walking his dog, glancing curiously at Martin's car in the driveway. How strange that life continued normally outside while my family imploded within these walls. Brandon attempted to regain control of the situation. Mom, listen to me. We can work this out. There's no need for evictions or legal threats. I agree, I said, surprising them. There is an alternative. I removed the second set of documents from my briefcase, the formal rental agreement Martin had prepared. This is a legally binding rental agreement. If you choose to sign it, you may continue living here under specific conditions. I outlined the terms. Formal monthly rent payments based on market rates, clearly defined responsibilities for household expenses, and explicit acknowledgement that I retained sole ownership of the property and all decision-making authority regarding it. You expect us to pay you rent? Lisa asked incredulously. We're family. Yes, we are family, I agreed. Family who should respect and support each other, not exploit and discard each other when convenient. Family who should be honest about financial matters, not commit fraud. We can't afford market rate rent, Amanda protested. That's why we moved in together in the first place. You can't afford it, yet you were planning to take over the mortgage payments after forcing me out? I asked pointedly. Interesting. The conversation devolved into a mixture of accusations, justifications, and increasingly desperate attempts to make me reconsider. Brandon's anger escalated to the point where Martin suggested he step outside to cool down. Amanda cycled between tears and emotional manipulation, bringing up my grandchildren repeatedly. Lisa tried to position herself as a mediator, though she had been just as complicit as the others. What about the money that was taken from my account? I asked when there was finally a pause in their protests. Brandon, who had returned somewhat calmer, looked at the floor. We can pay it back. Over time. You will pay it back, Martin stated firmly. The question is whether Eleanor pursues criminal charges for the fraud. Another shockwave went through the room. The reality of potential criminal consequences seemed to finally penetrate their sense of entitlement. Mom would never press charges against her own children, Amanda said, but her voice wavered with uncertainty. I let the statement hang in the air without confirmation or denial. The truth was, I didn't know if I could bring myself to take such a drastic step, but they didn't need to know that. You have two options, I said finally. Sign the rental agreement and abide by its terms, or vacate the property within 30 days per the eviction notice. I'm giving you 24 hours to decide. 24 hours? But we need time to. You've had plenty of time, I interrupted Lisa. Time you used to plan how to take advantage of me. The deadline stands. I gathered my documents, returned them to the briefcase, and stood. I'll return tomorrow morning at 9 for your decision. Where are you staying? Amanda asked, a hint of genuine concern in her voice. That's no longer your concern, I replied. The hurt must have shown on my face because she flinched slightly. As Martin and I walked to the door, Brandon made one last attempt. Mom, please. We're sorry. We never meant to hurt you. I turned to face my children, these adults who had come from my body, whom I had loved and nurtured and sacrificed for. I believe that you're sorry you got caught. I'm not convinced you're sorry for what you did. With that, I left the house, feeling both shattered and strangely liberated. The confrontation had gone more or less as Martin and I had anticipated, but nothing could have prepared me for the emotional toll. These were my children. Despite everything, I loved them. How had we arrived at this point? You did well in there, Eleanor, Martin said as he opened his car door. Very composed. I don't feel composed, I admitted. I feel like I'm breaking apart. That's understandable. But remember, you're the wrong party here. You've offered them a reasonable alternative to eviction. The ball is in their court now. As I got into Judith's car, she had insisted on waiting nearby. I wondered what decision my children would make. Would they accept the rental terms, swallowing their pride but keeping a roof over their heads? Or would pride and resentment drive them to reject my offer? Either way, our relationship was forever changed. The innocent trust one had placed in them was gone. Whatever happened next, I would need to protect myself first, a painful lesson for any parent to learn. How did it go? Judith asked as I buckled my seatbelt. About as well as could be expected, I replied, my voice thick with unshed tears. But tomorrow will be the real test. As we drove away, I couldn't help looking back at the house once more. Whatever happened tomorrow, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never again allow myself to be taken advantage of, not even by those I loved most in the world. The 24 hours that followed were among the longest of my life. I stayed at Judith's house, alternating between anxious pacing and periods of numbing exhaustion. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from my children, some apologetic, others defensive, all attempting to negotiate in some way. I responded to none of them. The time for negotiations had passed. They had two clear options, and further discussion would only muddy the waters. You should try to eat something, Judith urged that evening, setting a bowl of soup in front of me. You'll need your strength tomorrow. I'm not hungry, I said, but made an effort to take a few spoonfuls to please her. I keep wondering where I went wrong, Judith. Was I too generous? Did I make it too easy for them? You were a loving mother who wanted to help her children, Judith replied. They're the ones who took advantage of that love. Don't blame yourself for their choices. Her words were comforting, but the questions persisted through a mostly sleepless night. By morning, I had resigned myself to whatever decision my children had made. Either way, I would move forward with dignity and self-respect. Martin picked me up at 8:30, his briefcase containing both sets of documents, the rental agreements and the eviction notices, along with some additional paperwork he hadn't explained. Are you ready for this? He asked as we drove toward my house. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, smoothing my skirt nervously. I had dressed carefully that morning, choosing an outfit that made me feel confident and composed. When we arrived, all three of my children were already waiting in the living room. The atmosphere was tense but noticeably different from the previous day. Their anger seemed to have subsided, replaced by a somber resignation. Have you made your decision? I asked without preamble. Brandon nodded, acting as spokesperson once again. We'll sign the rental agreement. We don't have much choice. You always have choices, I corrected him. This is simply the one with consequences you're willing to accept. Martin placed the rental agreements on the coffee table. As my children reviewed and signed the documents, I noticed they avoided meeting my eyes. Shame, resentment, or a mixture of both. I couldn't tell which dominated their emotions. What about the money that was taken from my account? I asked once the rental agreements were signed. Brandon cleared his throat. We can start repaying next month, once we've adjusted to the new rent payments. That's not acceptable, Martin interjected. The fraudulent withdrawals must be addressed immediately. We don't have $30,000 just sitting around. Amanda protested. Actually, I said quietly, there's another option. I nodded to Martin, who removed the additional documents from his briefcase. These are agreements to work off the debt through community service, I explained. 20 hours per week at local charities of my choosing, documented and verified, until the equivalent of the stolen funds is repaid at market labor rates. My children stared at me in disbelief. Community service? Lisa repeated. Like criminals? Like people making amends, I corrected her. The alternative is a formal police report for identity theft and fraud. Your choice. After a tense discussion among themselves, they signed these agreements as well. Brandon would volunteer at a homeless shelter, Amanda at a literacy program for underprivileged children, and Lisa at a senior center. The irony of the last assignment wasn't lost on any of us. With all documents signed, I had one final revelation. There's something else you should know, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion bubbling beneath the surface. I've amended my will and created a new trust for my assets. This caught their full attention. Despite everything, they had likely still been counting on inheritances. The bulk of my estate will now go to charities supporting elderly victims of financial abuse and single mothers in need of education and housing assistance, I continued. A smaller portion will be held in trust for my grandchildren's education, with strict conditions to ensure they develop financial responsibility. You're disinheriting us? Amanda asked, her voice barely audible. I'm protecting what remains of my assets from further exploitation, I clarified. And hopefully creating some good from this painful situation. The reality of consequences beyond the immediate legal matters finally seemed to sink in. Brandon slumped in his chair. Amanda wiped away tears. Lisa stared at the floor. What happens now? Brandon finally asked. Now we attempt to rebuild on new terms, I said. I'll be moving back into the master bedroom today. The rental agreement outlines all household responsibilities and boundaries. I expect them to be respected. And if we decide this isn't working for us? Lisa asked. Then you give 30 days notice and find alternative housing as any tenant would, I replied simply. But understand this. There will be no more financial bailouts, no more endless support. You're adults. It's time you lived as such. As Martin gathered the signed documents, I felt an enormous weight lifting. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, I had established clear boundaries with my children. Whether our relationship could be salvaged remained to be seen, but I would no longer sacrifice my security and self-respect on the altar of maternal guilt. The weeks that followed brought significant adjustments for everyone. My children struggled with the new financial responsibilities and the reality of our transformed relationship. There were tense moments, passive-aggressive comments, and occasional open conflicts. But gradually, something unexpected began to emerge. Brandon, initially the most resentful, found surprising fulfillment in his volunteer work at the homeless shelter. These people have nothing, Mom, he told me one evening, a new humility in his voice. Makes me realize how much I've taken for granted. Amanda's children, my grandchildren, seemed relieved by the more structured household environment. The constant financial stress that had permeated their young lives had diminished, replaced by clearer expectations and boundaries. Lisa, working with seniors at the community center, began asking me questions about my life, my memories, my experiences, showing interest in me as a person rather than merely as a resource for the first time in years. As for me, I discovered a new chapter opening in my life. With Martin's help, I established a small foundation using a portion of my remaining savings, focusing on educational programs for financial literacy among seniors and young adults. The work gave me purpose beyond family obligations. I also reconnected with old friends and made new ones, building a social circle that provided the emotional support I had mistakenly sought exclusively from my children. Judith remained my steadfast companion, her wisdom and loyalty, a constant reminder of what genuine relationship looked like. 6 months after the confrontation, as I sat in my garden planting spring bulbs, Brandon joined me, kneeling awkwardly in the dirt. I never thanked you, he said, surprising me. For what? For the wake-up call. For not pressing charges. For giving us another chance. He struggled with the words. I'm sorry, Mom. Really sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for what we did. For who we became. The apology, imperfect but sincere, cracked open a door I had feared permanently closed. Over time, similar conversations occurred with Amanda and Lisa. Healing began slowly, tentatively, with setbacks and renewed efforts. I harbored no illusions that our relationship would ever return to what it had been. Perhaps that wasn't even desirable. What was emerging instead was something potentially healthier. A relationship between adult children and their parent based on mutual respect rather than dependence and enablement. The greatest lesson from this painful chapter of my life was learning that love without boundaries isn't really love at all. True love for others and for oneself requires respect, honesty, and accountability. In establishing clear boundaries with my children, I had finally given them the opportunity to become the adults they needed to be. As I look toward the future, I don't know what it holds. My children may fully embrace this new relationship, or they may eventually choose to distance themselves when they realize the bank of Mom is permanently closed. My grandchildren will grow up, hopefully with better financial values than their parents developed. My foundation work will touch lives I'll never know. What I do know is that at 68, I've reclaimed my power, my self-respect, and my future. It wasn't the path I expected to walk in my later years, but it's become a journey of unexpected growth and discovery. If you're watching this and facing similar challenges with adult children or family members taking advantage of your generosity, remember, it's never too late to establish healthy boundaries. Your financial security matters. Your well-being matters. You matter. I'd love to hear your thoughts or similar experiences in the comments below. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones? How did you handle it? Please like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Remember, standing up for yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes, it's the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength and wisdom on your own journey.